how is it possible that the price of everything is outpacing inflation at the same time? We are taught in Economics 101 that we measure inflation by gathering up a basket of goods and services, labeling that the Consumer Price Index, and then tracking the weighted costs of that basket over time. In most months, some things will get more expensive, others will get a little bit cheaper, but over time, we expect that, on average, the basket as a whole will slowly get more expensive. And by the numbers, that is exactly what has been happening. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, since around mid-2023, that measured inflation rate has been around 3% annually, slowly trending downwards to about 2.5% today. But it doesn't really feel like that, does it? If you think about everything you purchase in a given week, you would probably be hard-pressed to identify something that is only 10% more expensive than it was 3 years ago. And no, Arizona iced tea doesn't count. The point is, if this basket of goods is supposed to track average prices, what is there left to bring that average down? Now, you might be thinking about something like this chart here. We looked at it many times before on this channel, because it shows that over the last 2.5 decades, essentials like healthcare, housing, and education have outpaced inflation. But the average has been offset by non-essentials like cheaper cell phones, software, and televisions. As trade deals go, it wasn't great. But today, we aren't even getting this stuff down here. Computer hardware has basically become a strategic investment. PlayStations that are now almost 6 years old just got a $150 price hike only 5 months after getting a previous $100 price bump. The average new car is rolling off the lot with a sticker price close to $50,000. Software has primarily become an ongoing and very expensive subscription. Fast food that used to be cheap, quick convenience has turned into a very expensive treat. Your energy bills are competing with multi-billion-dollar data centers. Housing, healthcare, and education has always been so messed up that it's barely even worth mentioning anymore. And beyond all of this, tariff discussions mean that even generic consumer junk is quickly becoming coveted collectibles. So is there actually anything left that is quietly offsetting these statistics and bringing that average back in check? Or is this all just another case of lying with statistics? These are some important questions because, well, with oil prices heading the way they are, none of this is likely to get better anytime soon.
Energy bills are making everyday life unaffordable.
Food prices will rise another 3% in 2026.
They want $15 for this big arch burger.
No new models under $20,000 remain on the market.
The Rampocalypse continues.
This will probably be 25 grand.
Companies that try to make everything into a subscription on your car.
Well, now it will only be offered through a monthly subscription.
This is an extreme amount of difference.
Okay, so the simple answer is no. You're not crazy to be a little bit skeptical about the inflation figures that suggest things are only getting more expensive at low single-digit rates year over year. However, it's probably not because the government is secretly pulling the strings of this process to make the results look better than they really are. If that actually was happening, there are so many people that look at this data every month that they would be quickly called out on it. Never attribute to malice what can adequately be explained by stupidity. And in this case, there are 3 major problems with how we process this data that is probably giving us the wrong idea about what we pay for, well, everything. The first is that it is incredibly difficult to control for quality in the official inflation rate, but maybe not in the way you might expect. We will get to broad market shitflation or shitification soon enough. But surprisingly, another difficult blind spot is things getting better. Something like a new iPhone performs the same basic function as the original that was introduced almost 20 years ago now. But the maximum capabilities of the modern offering are hundreds of times greater than what Steve Jobs walked onto stage with all those years ago. To the statisticians crunching the numbers, this presents a problem, because if prices remain more or less the same over the years, then you are technically getting more phone for less money. Similarly, if prices rise but capabilities rise much faster, there is an argument that a consumer can maintain their purchasing power by buying a lower-end phone that will still outperform a high-end product from several years before. Now, the BLS actually lays out their exact methodology on their website for how they deal with these kinds of changes in every single product category they measure. And in plain English, this is exactly what they do. If a phone gets more expensive, but it comes with a higher pixel count, a better processor, or an improved camera, it will be adjusted downwards in price to compensate for the improvement in quality over the previous offering. And this lower price tag is what will be counted in this basket even though it's not actually what you would pay. The same kind of adjustments are done for things like televisions. Something like a 65-inch flat screen has become a consumer norm today, but just 20 years ago, it would have been an extremely high-end commercial appliance. Now, there is nothing inherently unfair about these adjustments, but for a lot of people, it can stretch their budget, even if they aren't really getting any true benefits from these improvements. I personally use my phone to occasionally message my 3 friends and doom scroll the Financial Times. All of this could be done by a 15-year-old phone without many problems, in theory. I know that a lot of you watching probably have a similar use case, meaning we are all paying a higher price tag without offsetting it in performance in any meaningful way. Now, the statistician's response may be to just use an older or lower tier phone, but well, a lot of us would love to, if it were possible. Yeah, we still need to get to that enshittification problem. Either way, this is still a small slice of the pie because even though, in theory, these tech products have been getting cheaper, they still account for a relatively small portion of our spending, and a small share of this weird statistical anomaly as well. And to see that, we need to look at the bigger ticket items. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what's really letting everything outpace inflation at the same time. Most people have no idea how much of their personal information is already out there. Hundreds of data brokers are collecting and selling your data right now, and they don't need your permission to do it. That's why this video is sponsored by Incogni. Your email address, phone number, home address, and more are probably sitting on data broker websites right now, ready for scammers and identity thieves to buy. And it's not your fault. It's mostly because the companies you trusted with your data weren't careful enough with it. Incogni automatically contacts these data brokers on your behalf and demands they remove your information. They handle the back and forth, the follow-ups, and the legal requests so you don't have to. And with their new custom removals feature, they can even go after specific instances of your info being leaked online. Just Google yourself and you might be surprised to find that news sites, fitness apps, or random websites you've never heard of are holding and sharing your personal details. With custom removals, you just submit the link and Incogni's privacy experts will handle the rest. The way I see it, they can't steal your identity if they have no idea who you are. Go to incogni.com/howmoneyworks or use code howmoneyworks at the link below to get 60% off an annual plan and take your personal data back. Okay, so obviously not everything that goes into this basket is counted equally when calculating inflation, because some things just take up a larger share of household budgets. If the price of movie tickets doubled in a year, that might suck, but it's probably going to have much less of an impact on the average person's budget than something like the price of insurance. Unless you're Michael Bolton, I suppose. Anyway, what that means is that entertainment items like movie tickets are weighted much lower than insurance premiums when calculating the consumer price index and its change over time, i.e. the inflation rate. By that logic, it's probably unsurprising that the biggest category that gets thrown into this basket is housing, but it gets put in there in a really unintuitive way, because of course it does. The problem with housing, both from a societal and statistical perspective, is that it is both an essential consumer good and a speculative asset. But when the BLS is putting together the consumer price index, they want to separate out the speculative asset part of housing and focus on how people are using it just as an essential good to be consumed like food or water. The TLDR from all of this is that house prices aren't measured directly in this basket like the price of a can of beans is. Instead, the BLS surveys homeowners and rental listings to try and establish how much they think they would be able to rent their home for, something they call owner's equivalent rent. The idea is that if you are renting a house, you are making no contributions towards that being your asset, so it is pure consumption of shelter as a good and not an investment. The theory makes sense, but it also means that the biggest purchase that most people will make in their lifetime isn't directly counted by inflation. Now, it is still indirectly counted through this rental equivalent mechanism, but that creates 3 major problems of its own. The first is that rental agreements last for a very long time, which means this data can lag behind the reality of the true housing market by several months. The second is that rent isn't necessarily consistent between properties. Some include utilities, maintenance, and services, while others are extremely basic. The third problem is that for a lot of Americans who do actually own their own home, or at the very least dream of owning one day, it ignores other costs like maintenance, property taxes, HOA fees, improvements, insurance, and most importantly, mortgage interest, which can vary widely depending on when you purchased your house. Now, the BLS does acknowledge this in their reporting methodology, but I mean, nobody is actually reading this stuff. And even if they were, it doesn't make their money go any further at the end of the month when those bills are piling up. It doesn't help with the perceived disconnect between what we are told inflation is and what we actually feel. Now, the final big reason that everything feels like it is getting more expensive faster than inflation is because a lot of goods and services are just getting worse. Now, we have already touched on enshittification, where companies will offer the same product at the same price year to year, but skimp out on build quality, materials, or ingredients to save costs on their end while still being able to say that prices have stayed the same. This has been very well documented and reported on, including by the old team at Micro, so if you are somehow still unfamiliar with this insidious process, I will leave a link to that video in the description. Part of the reason why people can't get away with using old phones that would suit their needs perfectly fine is that repairability is terrible and software updates routinely render older hardware borderline unusable. The gradual decline in quality across the board of consumer goods has been widely recognized in the numbers, and probably in your own experience as well. But one aspect of this that is slightly direct, albeit just as sinister, is the number of hoops that you need to jump through in order to access reasonable prices now. For everyday purchases like groceries, insurance, and travel services, dynamic pricing has become the norm. This is a process where companies will build a profile on you and your shopping habits and use that to individually set prices for different shoppers to extract the highest possible price out of each individual person. A busy professional trying to rush to the grocery store on the way home from work will be more likely to pay a higher price for the same basket of goods when compared to a retiree shopping in the middle of the day. This dynamic pricing, despite being hilariously immoral, also makes it almost impossible to accurately assess what the average consumer will be paying for their statistical basket of goods because it will change depending on how rich and lazy an algorithm decides they are at any given point in time. There are similar pricing hurdles to this in other areas as well. If you want to get a decent deal at McDonald's these days, you need to download their app, check your daily rewards, and navigate different bundle offers to find the best deal that suits you. If you can be bothered to do all of this, then you might end up spending half as much on the same bag of food compared to someone who had the audacity to think that fast food should come cheap and convenient. So yeah, the statistical strain of keeping up with new and very expensive technology that has become increasingly essential, the strange way that we count a housing market that has left a lot of people behind, and good old-fashioned corporate cost-cutting. Combined, these have all helped to make it feel like everything is outpacing inflation at the same time. Now, those are the statistical nuances that you should be aware of when looking at the headline inflation rate. But even with all of that, this is still a weighted average. All of the statistical trickery in the world shouldn't change basic arithmetic, right? So for the sake of completeness, maybe we should look at what categories have actually been falling below the overall inflation rate in the last 12 months, right? Well, there is good news and bad news there. The good news is that one key category that has actually been falling has a very tangible knock-on effect throughout the entire economy. The bad news is that that category is gasoline and other fuels. And I can't imagine that when the latest CPI is calculated next week, fuel prices are going to maintain their downward trend. Now, I know that a lot of this sounds highly theoretical, and 15 minutes of analyzing weaknesses in government statistical collection probably isn't the most interesting YouTube video you could be watching right now. But I still really wanted to make it anyway, really because of how important it is to everything else in our financial lives that hangs off this inflation figure. We have asked for our pay raise to keep up with inflation, make sure our savings are earning interest so we don't lose our spending power, and we generally accept some price increases because businesses need to keep up with, well, inflation. But especially for most of you watching who are statistically younger, early career professionals, it is very likely that your true cost of living is rising much faster than this single measurement might suggest. And if you want further proof of that, go and watch this video next to find out how things are not only getting more expensive, but also systemically worse across basically every industry. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.